Dan Rubenstein, week 12, just about in the books. We got some games going on as we come on the air this evening, but by and large, we know what transpired. We know what we think is going to happen next. We can make some predictions on that. We can talk it through. The most important thing, though, is because your Oregon Ducks did eventually pull it out against Wisconsin. I do not need to spray paint my hair red.
That's true. I forgot about that. Did you acquire red spray paint?
I had a brief moment of panic. I'm not going to lie.
I thought you were going to have it red for tonight's show.
Well, it was going to be red in the event that Oregon lost.
Right.
I remembered that I made this declaration on the Thursday preview show about midway through the third quarter, at which point I started looking around on Instacart, and I'm not going to lie, the only thing I could find was Rust-Oleum red paint from Home Depot.
Yeah.
That is not what I was going for. Thank you, Dan.
I mean, you're building your follicles red brick by brick.
So I was prepared in the unlikely event that Braden Locke led an 80-yard drive to come on the air this evening and unfortunately let the fine folks down that it was going to have to happen on Tuesday because I was not going to go permanent spray paint on this wonderful head of hair of mine.
Sorry to hear it, Ty. I'm sorry to hear that you had a freak out and you got a little bit stressed that you're going to have to do that. I was stressed that Oregon might lose. That was stressful to me as an Oregon human. So I suppose all's well that ends well for me. So there's that.
Well, welcome back, one and all. This is our Week 12 recap episode. Thank you for downloading, for listening, for playing along at home. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. If you've already been doing that, make sure you tell a friend. Every little bit helps. Over the next hour or so, we're going to go through the big things from Week 12, talk through the main talking points, some of the title races that are out there, some of the complexities now that have arisen as a result of the games. Of course, we're going to read some of your tweets and posts. We will play your reverbs. We will do dude alerts. We will do the normal Saturday night regimen here on the show, Dan. But
of course,
why don't we first start with the Georgia-Tennessee game, since that was the one that, was the headliner coming into Week 12. That one appeared to be the big one. It was two ranked teams. Of course, Georgia did end up pulling that one out by a 31-17 score. Tennessee, at time of recording, is the highest profile team to have lost this weekend. There were actually 5 in total in the top 25 that lost. It was Tennessee, it was K-State, it was Louisville, it was LSU, and it was Mizzou. We will get into all of those games over the course, again, over the next hour or so. But the Georgia-Tennessee game was interesting for a while, at least. 17-all. At halftime. If you look at the box score, if you didn't watch the game, you'll note that it was fairly evenly matched with respect to time of possession. Georgia just got way more pop out of the passing game.
Yes.
And I think that's the takeaway. If you watch this game, and I think especially as we've had this discussion now for a few weeks running about Carson Beck, and does he have the yips? What's going on? He's been more turnover prone these last few weeks. That did not at all seem to be the case in this matchup. Maybe it's because they were at home. Maybe it's just because he worked it out of his system. But Carson Beck seemed very calm, very composed. Not only was he hitting big passes, hitting guys in stride accurately, he also was running in, I think, really high leverage moments to get first downs.
Yes.
To extend drives, to do things of that nature. So Carson Beck, for my money, was the best player in this game for Georgia on the heels of a couple weeks of really not so good play.
Yeah, I mean, what Oscar Delp was able to do in the red zone, and also it was the Stanford tight end transfer, Urasek, whatever, made plays in the red area. To me, may I be borderline crass for a second?
Sure.
The story of this was in the second half. It was kind of a Peter North story of Georgia finishing decisively.
Yeah.
In long drives, Ty. And each of these teams had longer drives. Georgia's were ending in 7. And in games like this, when you're putting together 6, 7, 8 minutes, I don't know what the exact number is on these Georgia drives, they weren't tedious. They weren't 3 yards at a time or anything like that, but they were taking their time and they were wearing out Tennessee legs. And to me, I mean, that's when Georgia does look excellent, that's the type of Georgia team we're used to seeing, because I don't think you're right. They don't necessarily, and we've talked about this, they don't have the consistent pop in the passing game. They did tonight. Carson Beck looked more confident, especially over the middle of the field. That Oscar Delp touchdown obviously was the punctuation of that thought. But yeah, picking up the plays with his legs and seemed to have a clearer mind. I want to say Georgia's been away from home for a month, right? I know Kirby made a comment about that it's actually nice to play a game between the hedges. I mean, if you take into account the Jacksonville game against Florida, I think it's right around a month since they last played a true home game. So maybe there was something about Carson Beck's mind at ease against an excellent Tennessee defense, but Tennessee was unable to sustain those drives in the second half. It was tied at halftime, right? It was 17-all.
17-all, yeah.
And there was something, and this was a theme of the day, is stacking the little things, that Georgia was able to stack more little things against Tennessee. And as much as I could see, because this game was happening at the same time as the number one team in the nation on the ropes, that Georgia just, I don't know, they were falling forward more. They were picking up 3rd and 7s more, and Tennessee was struggling with that. And, which Georgia team are we getting week to week? TBD. But hopefully if you're a Georgia person, human, whatever, that this is the start of a new section of their season.
Well, look, they look good. They really did. They look good. And to your point, yeah, they haven't been home in a good long while, since that Mississippi State game a few weeks back. And in between then, a lot has happened, right? They had the win against Texas. They have had these brief moments of panic in between then and now. Like, it's been a roller coaster of a 4 or 5 week stretch for Georgia Bulldogs fans.
Yeah.
But this was a nice punctuation mark as it relates.
By the way, the drops from Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's stacking little things. That's when we talk about that, that's what it is. That just completing passes, evading a pass rush, getting it to whoever. I know Dante Thornton had one on the sideline. Like, that was the thing to me. We're just like, you can't drop those balls against Georgia. You're just not going to win playing like that.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that as it relates, I think, to Tennessee and what we saw out of them. No, it's cool. Nico played in this game. He was in concussion protocol throughout the course of the week. He did play. I thought he looked really solid.
Yes.
The problem is that they weren't hitting much down the field.
No.
When I said earlier about getting more pop out of the passing game, he was completing passes. Georgia was the only side that was completing them down the field. Georgia was able to contain that Tennessee passing attack. Even if there were guys open, most of them were underneath, and it wasn't anything that really ended up killing them.
Right.
So for as good as I thought Nico looked, and for as effective as I thought he was, and poised as I thought he was, they were able to just sort of bottle him up and bottle up that threat. They gave up some third downs. Both sides did.
Yeah.
Right? It was a bend, don't break type of situation for both defenses. But in the end, it's Georgia 31-17. With respect, I guess, to the broader SEC discussion now, it's interesting. Georgia's right there. Tennessee, for their money, is still there. There's about 6 teams that are kind of grouped near the top. The 2 right now that have ascended to the very top of the SEC standings are Texas and Texas A&M, who, of course, play last week of the season. We did see LSU go down.
Oof, yeah.
This week by a 27-16 score. I don't know how much of this game you had a chance to watch. For a good long portion of this game, it's not even fair to have called it a rock fight. I don't know what's below a rock fight.
Yeah.
Is it a pillow fight? Is it like I posted this in a bunch of places. I was afraid to call it a rock fight for fear of offending the rocks.
Yeah.
This was a bad game for about 3/4 of it. Eventually, Florida was able to pull away. I thought DJ Lagway looked really good for his part.
Yes.
But there wasn't a whole lot to really hang your hat on in terms of this being a good game. This was a tough watch if you didn't have a rooting interest. Even if you did have a rooting interest, it was rough.
Well, it was a rough watch, especially if you are an LSU fan and one of the thoughts you have in your head is, well, at least the offensive line is something we can count on, because man, oh man, did Garrett Nussmeier get shelled. I think they had allowed, it was like 7 sacks this year, and Florida had 6 today. Right. I think that was the number. This is also a pretty beat up Florida defense as well. I know they're down corners, they're down a linebacker, they're down rotation guys that are usually playing a bunch of snaps, and they were really able to get to LSU. And it's I was looking at some LSU sites, and obviously, if you're an LSU fan, you're pretty down bad. And they were just like, "Do we have any good players? Are there any good players? There's Caden Durham and Mason Taylor. Is there anybody else?" A lot of people down on Brian Kelly. The Florida season's fascinating. The Florida season's great. Just specific to today, though, to watch DJ Lagway, and he was all bandaged up on, was it his left leg that he had the bum hamstring?
Right.
Stepping into the pocket. He had the huge throw that got them near the goal line to set up a touchdown. I came away so impressed with his resolve in, a difficult physical circumstance for him. But for Florida to pull this game out, and now LSU has lost 3 straight, right? A&M, Bama, and Florida. I don't know. We'll see what happens with the rest of Florida's schedule. I know obviously they have Florida State left. What's left of the Gators' year right now?
Yeah, Florida right now sitting at 5-5. They've got Ole Miss.
Yeah. That's gonna be real tough
next week, and then
it's a
they
big
close out on the road rivalry.
But they're gonna go to a bowl game
against Florida State. Yeah, I mean it figures to be a bowl season at this rate, given how bad Florida State has been. Of course, you don't want to assume anything with a rivalry game, but that they will be favored in that game. They should win that game, even if they don't end up knocking off Ole Miss. They look pretty good in this game.
I mean, they closed strong. Yeah,
they closed strong, and again, it's defense. How often have you and I recorded talking about Florida, where the story has been just a joke of a defensive effort, and they brought things along on offense, and even when they had Graham Mertz, he was fine. I thought he was very effective, and offense wasn't so much the issue. It's just been defense. And I've been saying for weeks now, people who listen will attest to it. I think Florida has improved on defense. I think whatever they are trying is working, and it's still not a shutdown defense, but you're looking for incremental improvements, and you're seeing it much more so on the Florida side, I think, the deeper we get into the season. So this is not to say they're going to knock off Ole Miss. We can talk about that game when we do our Thursday preview.
Right.
But I do think that, look, all things considered, probably not the wrong move to retain Billy Napier, because it feels like there is positive momentum. And given the schedule, how it looked coming into the season with the ammo that is on this thing, I'm looking at it now, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Miami. I mean, there's a lot of heavy hitters in the schedule. For them to emerge from this a bold team in and of itself is a huge accomplishment, especially given the injuries.
I know it's just, yes, and down their best receiver the last couple of weeks. I think Trey Wilson's out for the season, so Elijah Badger steps up against LSU. I think what you're saying is correct. I think you've put it in the proper context of in a vacuum, given their schedule, given losing their starting quarterback a few weeks ago, and Graham Mertz. But talking to a Florida person and be like, "Hey, 6-6, congrats, guys."
No, well, hey, that's not the standard.
That's tough.
That's not the standard.
Right.
That's not the standard, but I think as compared to being a laughing stock,
I agree.
Especially on defense, which
on the
is where
table.
They were to be where they're at now, to emerge from this schedule.
Yeah.
With so many questions.
It's always going to feel good to beat LSU if you're a Florida human.
Oh, yeah. The only other SEC point, and we have a few other things that I guess we can mention a little bit later on in the show, the Texas-Arkansas game kind of had me going for a little bit. Texas was my lock. My locks have been historically bad again. So we're back to kind of where we closed out last season.
Yeah.
The locks have been terrible.
What was the number in this game for Texas? Their favored by?
The closing line was about 13.5.
Okay. They were terribly off.
They end up winning this one 20-10. It wasn't terribly off, and they did have a run at it. However, there was a swath of this game where it felt like they might lose.
Right.
They might lose this game. So it's a rivalry. Anytime you've got a rivalry, perhaps I should have thought better before laying the points here.
Right. It was an on and off rivalry, but a rivalry nonetheless. Yeah.
It was not an impressive showing for the Texas offense. They were 4 of 15 on third downs. This was a story of them doing just enough to get the dub. Their defense coming up really big in a high leverage moment about midway through the fourth quarter. Arkansas has got the ball. They are driving in plus territory. Texas knocks the ball out, recovers a fumble. They go on a 14-play drive. They drain 7 minutes off the clock. They end up winning.
Oh, man.
Right. So this was I think, again, them leaning on their defense because their offense was not able to put forth the explosion that we have seen in other games this season. Defense at 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. They had turnover I mentioned and another one, only 2 penalties in total. This is a really disciplined effort for Texas. So when we have this broader discussion, as we did last season, about Texas being back, clearly the offense is something that we are all focused on. They've got a ton of talent. But defensively, the way they have gotten more physical, the way they have gotten more consistent, more disciplined, that has really been the engine for this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, Texas will only go as far as their defense takes them, because that is where the pop is on this team right now. And obviously they've improved somewhat on the ground, dealing with the injuries they have with Jaden Blue's reemergence. Quinn Ewers, another uneven performance. You mentioned the drive stalls. There's also something about like a Sark team that's not able to consistently have a go-to receiver or receivers in those big spots that, like, look, it's 3rd and 7, but like, yeah, we've got this route tree for Isaiah Bond that's just going to be killer for everybody. Like, none of these guys have emerged. It's more, a 10 feet wide, 1 inch deep kind of thing. Or I guess it's the other way around, right? It's super deep, but nobody's like really popping in this room consistently. In a Sark offense, that feels kind of weird, given that we thought this offensive line was going to be a strength, and we saw them take some abuse against Georgia. But I think, especially up front with these pass rushers and how smothering this Pete Kwiatkowski defense is for Texas, they're going to give a lot. I mean, you look at who they could potentially play in, obviously they're going to have Texas A&M, and who they could potentially play in a playoff scenario. They can beat anybody in the country 17-13 on the right day. And it would be real nice, if you're a Texas human, to be able to be confident in scoring 31-37 points against most good teams. And they don't seem like they're that team consistently, but that defense is, they're angry, they're fast up front, and they've got what do they call it? The NASCAR package, where they just yep, these are our 4 angriest players on defense. We're just going to line them up and tell them to go. And that's pretty cool to have that ability on a 3rd and 8 on your Jesse Palmer 3rd in California. That's awesome. They're really, really, really good up front, but we'll see how far that takes them.
Yeah, they've got Kentucky next week. They close out the year, the next installment of their rivalry with A&M on the road in Kyle.
And Arkansas has been scoring a lot of points most of the time. It seemed like, other than Jaquindon Jackson, there was not much there.
There was not much there. So that's the state of play right now in the SEC. We will dive in on Tuesday and talk a lot more about tiebreakers.
I don't get 30 to 40 minutes to talk about Lenora Sellers. Is that what you're telling me right now?
We're going to save the Lenora Sellers love for a little bit later on.
Okay. So put a pin in that.
Put a pin in that.
Thank
thankfully. All right. Let's talk about Oregon. Let's talk about the Big Ten race.
Pass.
Because one of the things that I think has been a recurring theme in our last discussion about Texas, in previous discussions about Georgia, really about this season of college football, part of why it feels wide open is because consistency is truly at a premium. And some weeks you have it, and some weeks you don't. There are very few teams that I think have exhibited the ability to show consistency throughout. And Oregon was one of those teams. They were one of those teams maybe before this week. Now, you can tell me if that's a fair statement or not.
Okay.
Oregon went to Wisconsin this evening. They won 16-13. It was not a great showing for their offense.
On Spinella Saturday, watch your back. Yeah.
Spinella Saturday, watch your back. We did see another curious decision, I would say, from your boy Dan Lanning, going for a fake field goal inside 2 minutes when leading 16-13.
Yeah.
It ended up not really making much difference as Oregon tipped the pass 2 plays later. Mateo Uiagalelei comes down with the interception. Oregon falls on it, runs the clock out. They end up winning the game. But 16-13, as you look at this game, what are your takeaways here? And is it anything that you look at and you say, all right, as somebody who watches all the Oregon games, this is something now that I find worrying going into obviously a bye, but still one big one left, the revenge spot against Washington, presumably the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
And then whatever happens as they go into the playoff.
Oregon looked very flat, and Oregon has looked flat for stretches, and it got people's attention those first couple games against Idaho and Boise State when they were shuffling around things on the offensive line. But even against schools like Maryland on defense, when Maryland's receivers were getting loose a little bit, or Illinois in the second half where they weren't able to do much but kind of cruise to a victory, like this hasn't been a score 52 a game type Chip Kelly Oregon team. It's been more balanced. It's, they've played at different tempos, and they've gone stretches, especially in third quarters this season, where they've seemed sluggish.
Yeah.
And so you look at the number of weeks in a row, I don't know if it was 8 weeks or something like that without a bye, but they've played a good amount of time without a bye consecutively, and they just looked tired. And, credit the Wisconsin defense and that atmosphere at Camp Randall seemed pretty great for an opportunity to be upset. But the play calling wasn't there. Dylan Gabriel looked a little bit shaky in the pocket and not sure where pressure was coming from and not trusting his offensive line at times. They're a different team without their best receiver. Sometimes on defense, especially against the run, when Wisconsin was able to push them around a little bit, they were a different team without their best defensive lineman in Jordan Birch, who was out in this game. It's not an excuse. Everybody's dinged up. Oregon is recruited well enough that you can't say like, oh, they're down a receiver. They're completely collapsing, because that's why you have a receiving room of 8 or 9 super talented dudes. So Oregon had opportunities. Dylan Gabriel throws the interception in the red zone. There's a long completion where an open tight end just slips on, gets eaten up by the turf monster. And those things happen to everybody. And Oregon, as an undefeated number 1 team, should be able to find more ways to overcome those types of issues. And they really weren't for a good chunk of this game. And it was the defensive line getting a Wisconsin passing, quote unquote, attack that they were able to feast on in the second half of this game. That seemed to be the difference. A Wisconsin team with an above average, series of receivers and quarterback play and offensive linemen protecting said quarterback. They're beating Oregon. That's the difference in this game. That Wisconsin is not built to come back, is not built to drive the field when they need to drive 80 yards near the end of a game.
What was your level of
concern?
What was your level of concern on that drive when they stopped Oregon on the fake field goal?
Right.
Braden Locke gets the ball. Let's say, I don't know what it was. Let's say he had to drive 80 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all worried, 10 being completely terrified.
Yeah.
Where were you at that he was going to lead them on some sort of game-winning or game-tying drive?
1.7.
Yeah.
Truthfully, yeah. Again, if this were, take your pick of replacement level Big Ten quarterback, Luke Altmaier, 5.2, 4.3, something like that. This Oregon defense is, the corners happen to be very good, and the pass rush had been getting home against this Wisconsin offensive line. And so it was very difficult to see that. I was probably more worried when Oregon had the ball that Dylan Gabriel, being shorter, get another pass tipped, and what Wisconsin's able to run it back for a touchdown or run it back into field goal position, something like that. That was actually the scarier thing. And for as much as Dylan Gabriel struggled in moments in this game, he was also the reason Oregon won this game with big runs, big 4th and 9 conversion pass. Like, he made huge plays in this game as well. But there were moments where the play calling didn't seem great. There was a third down where they just ran it straight into the line. The fake field goal, say what you will, it's an ethos for Dan Lanning.
No,
going for those moments.
He sticks to it, man.
He sticks to that vision, that balls to the wall vision. And so they won their clunker. I'll say this, because I've said this about other teams. It makes me rethink how buttoned up they are if they're going to play Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State again. It seems like there are more vulnerabilities in this Death Star. There's just like a small, what is it? How many parsecs? There's some Star Wars reference here, Ty, where there's a very small vulnerability in the Death Star. This one seems a little bit bigger after, but I think the bye week is very good for them.
Well, again, look, it's just one of those deals where we do question the consistency, and I wonder if that question stems from vulnerabilities in the Death Star, so to speak, or simply just playing with your food.
Yeah.
Which is it?
I mean, I think they were tired. I think they've shown some vulnerabilities. I think a week off before Washington will help things and help health. And I think they're a different team on 3rd and 6 with Tez Johnson. Whenever he comes back, he has been that guy for them that consistently keeps drives going. We saw the catches against Ohio State down the field that changes the calculus of how teams play against this Oregon offense. So we'll see. I think they're excellent, but I don't think they're unbeatable.
With respect to the broader Big Ten race,
Yes.
Indiana was on bye. Indiana spent its bye week re-upping Curt Cignetti to an 8-year deal worth $8 million per year.
Yeah.
Good for him. He says they're an emerging power. That would be awesome. So kudos to Indiana for locking him up.
What's a buyout number come out?
I think it's 8 years, about $8 million per year.
Okay.
Something like that. So he's being rewarded. And as he said in an interview that he gave, they were being proactive about it to try and retain his services, as well they should, after what they've got so far. Look, if you can come in with what Indiana had a year ago and spin gold out of this, maybe it's a flash in the pan, granted, but I like the move. I like the move. I like the commitment to football. We can come back to that, though.
I'm not going to say it's a bad move. I'm just not positive it's an amazing move.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. Indiana was on bye. Indiana's got a big one next week against Ohio State, which we might do a watch-along thing. We haven't decided yet.
Yeah.
Ohio State played in Wrigley against Northwestern. They killed them. Had a really interesting block of a punt down by the goal line. It was snapped over the punter's head for Northwestern. He frantically tried to punt it, and then they blocked it. So Ohio State rolled. Penn State also rolled over Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those teams, I think, are just sort of on coast at this point in time. Penn State's got a big one coming up against Minnesota, which I'm mildly terrified about. Not because I think Minnesota is this looming threat, but because there's some scar tissue there and because it's on the road. The other thing that I have to point out about Penn State, and this may be a bit of a controversial take, okay?
I'm ready.
But I've got the Beaver Avenue, Locust Lane signs behind me. I'm a Penn State grad, so I'm entitled to say this.
The floor is yours.
I'm starting to get really annoyed with this Tyler Warren thing. Okay?
In what way?
I feel like they are cheesing him and his abilities more because they want to than because they have to.
Right.
And it's going to set up a situation later in the year, and you can see it coming already. They're going to make it through the rest of their season. In all likelihood, they're going to go into a playoff. They stand a really good chance of hosting a home playoff game, given what we've seen out of the rankings.
Yeah.
Great stuff, right? That's good. Eventually, what's going to happen is they're leaning so much on him that they're going to get to play a good team in the playoff, and that good team is going to triple cover Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, the second pitch that they haven't developed is going to be on display for the world to see, and they're not going to have an answer. And that's what I'm fearful of. I'm fearful they're leaning so much on him that when push comes to shove against a better team, they're not going to have a second option. And that's going to be very bothersome. I hope that is not the case. I enjoy watching him. He's obviously very talented, but he was their leading rusher, their leading receiver. It's a wonder he wasn't also their leading passer.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, leave it to me to be annoyed by this.
What was the final score here?
I don't know, 49-something. They killed 49-10. They destroyed Purdue.
Yeah.
But leave it to me to be annoyed by this. I guess I'm not that annoyed by it, but this is something I'm worried about in seeing how they continually use him in like every situation.
Can I weigh in?
Please.
I think this is borderline take jacking, Ty. A
Is
week
it?
ago, I sat here and I was like, what are they? They're just like in the red zone and deciding like, let's bring in Bo Prabula or let's direct snap it to Tyler Warren. And like, let's only keep it away from receivers and Drew Aller. So anytime we're actually in a high leverage moment in a huge game, these guys don't have the confidence of previous reps. Your take is slightly different, but I feel like it's in the same genus as like Penn State's just kind of messing around and not figuring out how to run a complete playbook and running everything through this incredible tight end.
He's really good.
Granted.
Look, they want him to win the Mackey Award. That much is obvious at this point. They want
but
by
at
39.
what price, Ty?
At
what price?
Also, the highlight of this game was a Purdue receiver losing track of where he was in the back corner of the end zone.
I felt bad.
And seemingly thinking he had a foot down, but then realizing he was about 3 feet out of bounds.
Yeah.
Because of the way things were painted back there. You can find that highlight online.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think you're, the idea of, 3rd and 3, it's direct snap to Tyler Warren. 3rd and goal, direct snap to Tyler Warren or Bo Prabula or whatever. That like there is something, and they were kind of doing that with Will Levis before, right? There's like a weird James Franklin overlapping with different offensive coordinators where he has this weird thing about unorthodox,
he likes to try all the plays in the playbook. If he's playing college football 25, he likes to try all the plays with the crazy motion just because he's interested in them.
Yeah,
that's what always make sense.
We talked a little bit about that there is something wonky about Penn State, especially in the red zone, that the receivers aren't involved, that Drew Aller is not involved in these moments. Like, it's just more often than other quarterbacks, their supposed star quarterback has the ball taken out of his hands. And like, are you going to do that against Texas in the playoff? Are you going to do that against Oregon? Are you going to do that against Miami? Whoever you end up, and you're just going to keep, okay, all right.
And I think the supporting point behind that is what we saw against Ohio State.
Yeah. High leverage moments.
We saw it, the high leverage moments.
Well, it's not just this year's Ohio State. It's games against Michigan in previous years. It's games against Ohio State in previous years. Yeah.
Absolutely. By the way, Drew Aller completed his first 10 passes. He had a really nice day, 3 touchdowns, close to 250. It wasn't like they took the ball out of his hands, but this is just something to watch. Okay, I don't think it's anything that will materialize between now and the end of the season, but as we get into the playoffs, provided Penn State makes it, let's just put another pin.
The war on Warren. Yeah.
The war on Warren. All right. Speaking of things that are wonky, let's talk about the Big 12, Dan. So,
please.
At time of recording, BYU is squaring off against Kansas. They are in a fight for their undefeated lives, okay?
Yeah.
We will come back to that on Tuesday because that won't be over by the time we are done here. We had Arizona State knocking off K-State 24-14. We had a win for Iowa State, pulling away late over Cincinnati, 34-17. We had Colorado also pulling away late from Utah. We have a situation at the top of the Big 12, which is very muddled, very interesting, has a million different possibilities. But we should start with the ASU win because, look, ASU had something like a 3% chance to win the conference. I'm sure that's a little bit higher. I'm not here to say tonight that I think that's what's going to happen because I don't.
Pick last, though.
But
preseason, weren't they number 16? The media poll?
But ASU now is a 2-loss team.
Yeah.
They just went and knocked off Kansas State 24-14. They had to hang on in order to do it. They were up 21-0 at half, and then they scored 3 points in the second half. But I like their quarterback situation. I obviously like Cam Scattaboo.
Another big game for Jordan Tyson.
Another big game for Jordan Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like this is a team with momentum. And that is the one thing that I am always fixated on this time of year. I don't care so much about your record. I don't care so much about what you are playing for.
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel like you are getting better? Especially if you're a team like an Arizona State, where nobody had high expectations for ASU coming into this year. Is this a team that is growing? Are they showing it week in and week out? Does it feel like they are getting better? And they absolutely do. This is beyond the point now of just being a random flash in the pan, a good week here that everybody feels good about, and then you never see it again. This is more of a trend. Never mind the fact that some of it may be related to the teams they have been playing, but this was a good one this week against K-State.
Mm-hmm.
So to do what they did in the manner that they won, I just come away week in and week out so impressed by the Sun Devils and what Kenny Dillingham has done in just a short time in Tempe.
We've talked about Maction, of course, Ty. This game was staction. This was ASU stacking little things. Every time Kansas State made a mistake, there was ASU there to take advantage, turning a turnover into points, turning a turnover on downs into points, especially in that first half. And Kansas State, as we talked about, when they lose ugly this year. They lose turning the ball over like crazy. They lose Avery Johnson making boneheaded decisions. A very good quarterback, sometimes making very bad decisions, bad field goal snaps, bad everything in this game. So they were stacking charts in this game. I don't know how to explain what Kansas State was doing in this one, but it was almost immediately coming out, making mistakes. I think it was, an interception, a turnover on downs, a 3 and out. Like, they just were not prepared. The game plan was not anywhere near sound enough against an ASU team who has been very quietly quality this year. And Kenny Dillingham has this team kind of playing with their hair on fire. He talked about, I think he was like downloading clips of TV shows and radio shows and podcasts to get his team pumped up. It worked. Cam Scatterbo came back from injury, didn't do a ton on the ground, but had key moments through the air.
Yep.
And with short fields, ASU was able to do what quality teams do and take advantage. Really nice game.
They are 8-2,
yeah,
which is another great story that we have seen emerge out of the Big 12. We've had a couple of them, right? We're watching BYU right now. Colorado, by the way, pulled away late. They had to kind of deal with a semi-comeback bid, I'll call it, from Utah.
Well, in Utah, it's hard to say, like, they're not with their starting quarterback. Their backup quarterback wasn't that good, so they went to their third string, but then he was unable to go, so they went back to Isaac Wilson. So I don't know how you look at Utah and say we're not without somebody, but yeah, they were not prepared to win this game.
Well, they pulled within 11 with about
they did
8:30 left in this game. That's when Colorado poured it on. They had 2 touchdowns, end up winning by 25, 49-24 was your final. A bunch of big plays here for Colorado, which is not characteristically something we see out of this Utah defense. Usually pretty good about that. Touchdowns of 40, 37, and 47 yards. Plus, there was also a 76-yard punt return for Colorado. Colorado is not built necessarily around the running game, but they did get a little bit more pop out of their ground game. Isaiah Gustav.
Sorry.
Thank you. 8.4 yards per carry, had the touchdown. The defense continues to play well. They had 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. Travis Hunter remains a beast. I don't know if you saw the interception, the tipped interception that he had. And I saw. He also had a touchdown or whatever. I mean,
he had a ridiculous catch, like splitting 3 different dudes in like the red zone. It was amazing.
He's incredible. He has to be in New York. I'm fine with just giving him the Heisman at this point. I mean, he is doing something that nobody has ever done before with how much he is playing and the fact that he is staying healthy enough to do it week in and week out and could be part of the engine that takes these guys all the way to the Big 12 championship game. That's pretty cool.
Sure. And become a 4 seed potentially in the playoff. Yeah.
Become a 4 seed. Yeah. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here as I've been looking through tiebreaker scenarios and whatnot. But one thing that remains static, despite the fact that there are things that have moved around a fair amount this week, Colorado does control its own destiny. And this is not to say that we expect them to get to the playoff, make any kind of mark on the playoff, right? I mean, I suppose anything's possible. I don't want to rule it out, especially this season. But Colorado controls its own destiny. Let's start with the Big 12. To get to the Big 12 title game, if they win the rest of their games on their schedule, they're going to be in the Big 12 title game.
It's an overwhelming success. Making the Big 12 title game is an overwhelming success.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Absolutely huge. So that's the state of affairs in the Big 12. We will.
What about Baylor dropping half a hundo? We don't need to go like super into
Baylor.
it.
We will.
I know,
Baylor.
but like, I just want to acknowledge that happened.
We will.
Okay.
We will. I do want to talk about the ACC first, though.
Okay.
Speaking of these title races, right? We had SMU engaged in an interesting battle with Boston College. We had the Clemson Pitt game, which was also very interesting.
Yeah.
We had Stanford knocking off Louisville, which I don't know any of us had that on our bingo cards, Dan. Nope. Which of these games did you watch the most of?
I watched a lot of Clemson Pitt this morning, and I watched a lot of Stanford Louisville tonight after the fact. I watched the end of it, seeing that it was close, and then I went back and went through it pretty quickly. So I guess those would be the 2.
Yeah, and I went back and I rewatched the SMU Boston College.
I scrubbed through that quickly as well. Yeah.
So Clemson ends up beating Pitt by a 24-20 score. They end up winning via I don't want to call it a fluke because I feel like that takes away from what Cade Klubnik did.
Right.
But it was just a really bad tackling display that Cade Klubnik was able to navigate through for a 50-yard touchdown with about 1:16 left. That gave Clemson the win. That's after Pitt stormed back in the fourth quarter to take the lead. If you're a Pitt fan, I think you're furious looking back on this game, thinking of a particular possession where they had first and goal inside the Clemson 5 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And then they kept backing themselves up. It's one of those deals where they keep shooting themselves in the foot, illegal formation, delay of game, false starts, that type of thing. They end up coming away with 3 points instead of 7. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe it's not. The Pitt defense was pretty aggressive in this one, had 14 tackles for loss.
It's ridiculous.
5 sacks. I mean,
I saw Clemson had allowed like 34 in their ACC games thus far, and Pitt had 14 or 14 and a half tackles for loss. Ridiculous.
You can't put this on the Pitt defense at all.
No.
This was a solid effort from the Pitt defense. They didn't. It was just that one possession down the stretch, in particular that one play where a bunch of blown tackles and Cade Klubnik springs it for a 50-yard touchdown. So Pitt's lost 3 straight, which is not a great place to be. We can talk about that in due course. But Clemson right now, Clemson is sort of in the mix for this thing. It'll be interesting to see the way the ACC title race shakes out from here moving forward. The tiebreaker between them and Miami, if it comes down to that, still favors Miami because Clemson lost to Louisville.
Right.
Earlier in the year, and Miami won that. You remember that game with all the points. That was close late, too, but Miami did end up getting the W. But Clemson, is still kind of in this thing. What we have to watch now, I think, moving forward is what goes down with SMU.
Yeah.
SMU knocked off Boston College 38-28. This is a tight game. This is a tight game the full way through. SMU jumps out to a lead, but then BYU, or I keep saying the wrong team name here.
They're all like these 3-letter schools. It runs together, Ty.
Boston College with Grayson James, their new quarterback now.
Yeah.
They end up storming back. It felt like the SMU front seven had a real advantage. They blitzed Grayson James a lot. They created a lot of pressure here. So I like seeing that. That was nice. Kevin Jennings, their quarterback, again, his ability to we've talked about this before too. You know this. His ability to get outside the pocket, to throw on the run, to avoid sacks. That played a really big role in this game earlier on. So they're still unbeaten in conference, 9-1 overall. They only have that loss to BYU. And it seems as if, provided there aren't any kind of late hiccups, they're in a good spot. I would add, they close out the year against the Calgorithm and the Cal Golden Bears.
Where's that game?
The game is in SMU.
Okay. It's in Dallas. Yeah.
And Cal won't have much to play for.
It's okay.
Other than raining on SMU's parade. So all fear the Calgorithm. Who knows what comes out of that?
No, excellent win for SMU, all things considered. This roster has been good, obviously hitting the portal like they have, getting away with the Duke game on the road. Winning is a skill. They managed to overcome a bunch of turnovers. They managed to overcome a comeback from Boston College today. ACC is all over the place. I think you nailed it on Clemson. By the way, when you were talking about Clemson, it reminded me, the Cade Klubnik eventual winning touchdown run. I was like, oh, there's like kind of shades of Max Duggan taking a ton of abuse but willing a team. Like, oh, same offensive coordinator, the Garrett Riley experience. Maybe not always put yourself in position to win comfortably, but rely on a huge run from a scrappy quarterback to win that game. I didn't think SMU was going to be in this position, and we'll see what their depth looks like if they're thin at certain positions come the end of the year in their first season in a power conference. What was your stat? They were the only team?
Yeah, so SMU is 6-0.
Yes, in the ACC.
6-0 in the ACC after having moved up to the power conference level.
Yeah.
That is the best ever. No team has ever been close when moving from a lower conference up into a power conference. In fact, no other team had ever even started 2-0, let alone 6-0. So what SMU is doing, totally separate from how far they go if they end up winning the conference championship or if they make the playoff or even if they lose out, all that stuff totally separate from this.
Right.
What they have done this season in moving up has been historic. It's been a really good campaign, not just within the context of this season, but historically speaking, teams moving up.
So what's the likeliest ACC championship is Miami SMU?
I think right now right in this moment it's Miami SMU. Yeah.
Good Rhett Lashley connective tissue. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're looking at Miami SMU.
Great. I would watch that.
The only other thing I want to add here on the ACC before we kind of broaden the scope of this conversation and talk about a few of the other stragglers that we did not get a chance to address, talking title races. Stanford beat Louisville, Dan.
Stanford beat Louisville behind only people named Emmett, right? It was just a series. What do you call a group of Emmets? Like it's like a murder of crows. It's a peloton of bicyclists. What do you call a group of Emmets? Because it was Emmett Kenny and Emmett Mosley, I believe, the kicker and the receiver.
Yeah.
Am I? Great for them.
Yeah. How many people are at this game? Like 4.5?
There were 47 people there. They were all promised free Papa John's. I assume they got it. Look, Ashton Daniels might have been benched a few weeks ago for a freshman quarterback. They were struggling it so mightily, and they still have been struggling so mightily with or without him. But I don't know. They were hitting back shoulder throws. They were getting explosion plays. They got a little bit fortunate with some bad Louisville luck.
Yeah, they did.
It was Louisville was Louisville up 2 touchdowns with like 9 minutes left. Louisville had this game.
Yeah, they did.
And Stanford fought back. They had, they were like well out of field goal range. Got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty because a Louisville DB decided to hang on to a Stanford receiver's leg out of bounds and sort of give him a shove after holding on to his leg for some reason out of bounds. That gave him 15. And then they were offsides on the initial 57-yard field goal attempt. So that brought him up. And this is the same dude who hit, it was Emmett. Which one's the kicker and which one's the receiver? Emmett Kenny's the kicker. He hit, if memory serves, 50-plus to beat Syracuse as well. This dude is nothing but nails.
Yeah, to your point, Louisville had a
Stanford
lead.
just has to get him in position to win a game. That's what they're not so good at.
Louisville had a 35-21 lead, just under 10 minutes left.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. They gave up 17 unanswered to lose.
Yeah.
Not great. Not great. Emmett Kenny, by the way, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Game-winning 52-yard field goal as time expired.
There was so much more empty bench in the shot than humans as the ball sailed through the uprights.
Crazy. 38, 35.
Stanford in the ACC. Thank God.
Thank God.
What would we do without it?
All right. I'm going to play this sound because I found it and I think it's funny.
Okay.
Let's make some snap judgments and jump to conclusions if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
It would be this mat that you would put on the floor and would have different conclusions that you could jump to.
So we don't got to go through each and every game, but let's talk about some teams that won or some things that stood out to us among those other games that we did not address at the top as we were talking through title chases and whatnot. Talk to me about Baylor. You want to talk about Baylor? You were big on Baylor coming into this week.
Yeah.
You liked this one a lot.
Yes.
Did you like what you saw? How did you feel?
Sawyer Robertson looks really good. What is it? Bryson Washington at running back. Another big Dame. Another. I combined day and game. Big game for him on the ground. Jake Spavital should be in a Broyles conversation with how down this offense had been. Baylor's a full-on scary team because of this offense. And I know West Virginia hasn't been the same team. They're beat up on offense. Obviously, they've had quarterback issues. They've had issues winning at home. Baylor, like almost from the jump, was super entertaining in this one.
This will be the moment for your Lenora Sellers love.
Okay, we're talking about America's team, South Carolina.
And mine as well. So South Carolina won in a crazy game, frankly.
Yeah.
Might have been the wildest finish of the day, 34-30 over Mizzou. They blew a 15-point lead, Dan, at one point And then they
Who
ended up
among
coming,
us? Yeah.
Yeah, and then they scored at the gun and ended up winning this one. So Brady Cook played for Mizzou. He threw an absolute dime to Luther Burden down the left sideline with about 1:10 left for a 37-yard touchdown. That was, for the moment anyway, a go-ahead. Carolina gets the ball back. They go 70 yards in like 40 seconds. Steal back the lead with 15 seconds left. Your boy, our boy, America's boy, Lenoris the Creator.
Yeah.
21 of 30, 353 yards, 5 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's going to make our dude alerts. He has to. I don't know.
Oh,
if he put
yeah,
him on the
yeah,
list,
yeah,
but he's clearly got to be on that list. South Carolina, if nothing more, is fun as hell.
Yes.
They're awesome up front on defense. When Lenoris Sellers is clicking like he did in this one, they are fun to watch because you don't know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of fun watching this game, not just because it was a crazy finish, but it just felt like a lot of weirdness all throughout. Just at the right moment in the day where I wanted the weirdness, that's what South Carolina gave to me here with this win.
Yeah, I mean, they have an offense that seems to only hit explosion plays exclusively, whether it's, Josh Simon, who's been very good for them, Rocket Sanders, Nick Harbor comes in and out. But Lenoris Sellers is the engine, and defensively, we know about this defensive line. We know about these edge rushers that are crazy. They still give up because they go for it. They take chances. They give up big plays. And so we have this incredible TV show every week in South Carolina. Are they going to lose at the last second to Alabama? They are. Do they have an opportunity to beat Alabama? They did. Do they have an opportunity to lose to Mizzou? Most certainly. Do they have an opportunity to beat Mizzou? Yes, of course. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes Lenoris Sellers gets hurt in a big game, and you're crushed because you want to see an exciting end to the game. And sometimes he's healthy and making plays, and everything is right in the world. And so against everything I thought of South Carolina and the SEC coming into the season, because we hadn't seen him in live action, because we didn't have a concept of what this offense was going to look like with him running things, and because of some of the how far down South Carolina had fallen at times on offense, you would hope that they would be a little bit more fun and interesting and productive. I didn't imagine it was going to be on this level. And as a fellow, bespectacled, wearing glasses.
Yeah.
As a person who needs corrective lenses, I'm even more excited for Lenoris Sellers to have this kind of success.
Let me just call something out here while you're talking about South Carolina. South Carolina right now has 2 games left.
Yes.
Next week against Wofford, that's a win.
Yeah.
Then to close things out, Palmetto Bowl on the road against Clemson. They win that one, they would get to 9-3.
Dabo's going to be so upset by Lenoris Sellers. Yeah.
But here is the point.
Okay.
We were talking about what Pitt did.
And by the way, we should mention with Pitt, that was no Eli Holstein today.
No Eli Holstein.
That was a Nate Yarnell game. That should be noted. Yeah.
What Pitt's defense did with all those tackles for loss. Okay, that's not to say that South Carolina is going to replicate that, but South Carolina has the front to replicate that.
Yes.
And you know damn well that Shane Beamer is going to be looking at the game tape from what Pitt did to Clemson, trying to see how he can get his guys mobilized in a similar way. That's a winnable game for South Carolina. And
I don't think the offensive line for Clemson's getting any better between now and then.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And my point is just, again, where we talk about teams like Florida and the schedule that they had to navigate this season, if they end up making a bowl, it shouldn't be the standard, but that would be an accomplishment in its own right. South Carolina is not in that different a situation because South Carolina had to basically reboot the offense. Remember, lost their quarterback from a year ago, is now in the NFL. Spencer Rattler, out.
Is he in the NFL?
He's somewhere. He's a backup. But Lenoris Sellers coming in, they changed the complexion of this offense. They brought in Rocket Sanders. I mean, there was a lot new here. And on top of it, the schedule featured LSU and Ole Miss and Alabama and A&M.
There's a lot of good defenses here.
A lot of good defenses.
Yeah.
If they can somehow emerge from this 9-3, even 8-4, incredible job by Shane Beamer.
Oh, yeah. Coach of the year shortlist, of course.
Give me a moment to talk about Notre Dame.
All right, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. Floor is yours.
It won't be that long, I promise you. Notre Dame had a moment in this game where they had a beautiful fake punt that was called back for illegal formation.
Okay.
It was awesome. Go and look at the clips. even though it got called back, it was super creative. Jordan Faison ran for like 76 yards. They explained it. To NBC's credit, I've given NBC nothing but tough love so far this year, but to their credit, their kind of rules analyst did a really good job explaining why it was a penalty and why it shouldn't have counted. So, right call.
Okay.
From that point forward, though, what I really enjoyed was Notre Dame going into Eff You mode. It seemed like that call pissed them off. This wasn't about Virginia. This was about sticking it to the refs. And they stuck it to the refs in their own way here. Now, they end up winning. They end up really pouring it on early, petered out a little bit late. I want to give credit where it's due for Virginia and their backdoor cover. 2-yard touchdown by Tony Muskett with 16 seconds left to pull this one within the number, end up covering 35-14 was your final. But again, Notre Dame just keeps plugging along. It's not to say they're playing the best teams in the world. They've got, I guess, a tougher game than maybe we thought preseason next week against Army at night.
Yeah, of course.
In Yankee Stadium. So that will be a meaningful game against a bowl team that will boost their resume in some regard.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that on Thursday and whether we're worried about that one or not from Notre Dame's standpoint. But I like the fact that they had a moment of adversity in this game, totally unrelated to Virginia, and they were able to respond in resounding fashion.
What was the final score?
35-14.
Great.
I like that. That made me feel good as a Notre Dame fan.
Nice. Go Irish.
Dan, USC.
Oh, this is a fun one.
USC, Nebraska. As luck would have it, another one-score game. How did these keep who would have thought it?
Yeah.
And USC won it, too.
USC was able to win. It didn't seem like I was not very confident in that, but then I looked across the field and I was like, well, it's Nebraska.
Yeah,
and it's in LA.
At one point you messaged me, you're like, do you want me to spoil how this is going to end?
Yeah.
It was a one-score game.
Yeah.
It was indeed a one-score. Jaden Maiava came in. He is the new quarterback, new QB1 after they benched Miller Moss, seemingly for like sloppy play, but then Jaden Maiava was kind of sloppy too in the very beginning part of this game.
Definitely. He threw a pick six to a former USC corner, right?
That's right.
Sierra Wright, literally right. He heaved the ball straight up as he was falling out of bounds, which on the like short list of quarterback don'ts.
That's a Cam Ward move right there.
It's Cam Ward. It was, if you want to go way back, Joe Ayub. I remember doing that for Cal. Remember Booyah? By the way, if Joe Ayub is listening to this and it was like, all right, I'm done catching strays. And we just, in November of 2024, I'm making a Joe Ayub reference. When you're sprinting out of bounds to throw the ball very much downfield and get away with it is extraordinarily rare. Jaden Maiava got away with it. He threw it straight up near the goal line. Deuce Robinson came out of the end zone, and he's like 7'9". You can look that up, Ty. And he came down with the ball and was able to get away with it. He got away with at least 2 or 3 more where it like went through the hands or was bobbled by a Nebraska defender and then caught by USC. Yeah. So I wouldn't say he was careful with the ball, but he got away with it more often than Miller Moss had the last couple games. So a nice win, and it's going to get lost in the weird Lincoln Riley of it all. Woody Marks has quietly established himself as one of the more fun running backs in this country. He is really, really fun to watch. He is dependable. There was a huge, I want to say, 4th down moment, a 4th and short moment. There was a perfect Lincoln Riley play call where there was like a play action fake, and then Jaden Maiava started running with it and was closed in on by Nebraska's defense, then pitched it to Woody Marks, who ran for like 30 yards on a 4th and short. He is so good. I really like watching him. Yeah, he's probably USC's best player.
He's really good, and he's got good wiggle, really good burst, and we've been saying it for weeks now. Just give him the ball more. Run the ball a little bit more. He's good.
Let's Cam Scattaboo this USC offense.
Well, especially now as you're turning to a younger quarterback, you know, let's just do the thing. Let's just run it. We know it works. They've got 2 games left on the road, quote unquote, on the road against UCLA next week, and then they close out the year with Notre Dame coming to town. So still a consequential slate here for USC, both for their own bowl chances and for what it could mean nationally with respect to the playoff conversation at Notre Dame.
Can we jump to a conclusion? Where's that USC Notre Dame game?
It's in LA.
It's in LA. Can we jump to a conclusion real quick?
Yeah.
If Notre Dame loses to USC, does that eliminate them from the playoff?
I think it should.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it should. USC right now is 5-5.
Yeah.
They need one win to get in a bowl.
So it would be 2 below average to average losses for Notre Dame.
I think it should.
Yeah.
Personally.
Okay.
It may not, but I think it should.
Okay.
Let's draw some other conclusions here. Let's talk about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, Dan.
Okay.
I did not see this coming at all. And I believe I said on our Big Ten breakfast, I made some sort of throwaway comment that I didn't think Ethan Kaliak-Manis was suddenly going to turn into this passer, that Rutgers was going to do something to like rejuvenate its offense. A lot of it felt like it was stuck in the mud. All of that was true before today. Ethan Kaliak-Manis had a really big game.
He did. Monangai was back too. Yeah.
Kyle Monangai was back. He was good again on the ground. Rutgers beats Maryland. Maryland was favored, I think, by about a touchdown. Rutgers wins.
Was it that much? Okay.
Yeah, 31-17 to get bowl eligible. Good on them. It was certainly in doubt, looking at the way that Rutgers was like closing out its second half of the season. So a big win for them. Maryland is almost certainly going to come up short at this point with what they've got remaining on the schedule, not the least of which is Penn State. They would have to basically sweep the remainder of their November, and that's just not something that Maryland ever does.
No.
So it's a bit of a bummer. I don't think it's entirely unexpected given some of the questions we had coming into the season. But the story here for me is Rutgers. Getting back to a bowl, the story here for me is Rutgers finding a way to, get more out of this offense, which is not something that I really expected. Even against Maryland, I don't think Maryland's got a horrible defense. So.
I went through it quickly, and that they really did nicely on 3rd and 4th down, extending drives. They were outgained by 100 yards almost by Maryland, but they were able to win way more big moments, and were down, I think, a start of the second half-ish, and then it was just all Rutgers. It was a really strong finish for Scarlet Knights on the road, right?
Correct.
In College Park, yeah.
The two other conclusions that I want to draw, and I promise you I am going somewhere with this.
Okay.
We haven't talked about G5 yet.
Okay.
The G5 playoff spot.
Tulane's my team.
Might end up going to Tulane. Who knows?
Okay.
They would need something to happen to Boise. I think Boise right now is the inside track. But Tulane, for their part, crushed Navy. 35-0. In so doing, they clinch an American title game appearance against Army. That's going to be a really consequential game.
Okay.
Boise State pulled away from San Jose State late. They end up winning by 42-21.
They had a pick six in there. Yeah.
Ashton Ginty ended up having 3 more touchdowns, $159, that type of thing. The conclusion that I am slowly coming to about the college football playoff, about how the G5 fits into the equation and all that, and we've had several people email about this over the last couple weeks, and people have been screaming at me about this on social media. I'm not fully there yet, but in looking around college football, there feels like an increasing likelihood of both the ACC and the Big 12 cannibalizing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's obviously going to win these conferences, but there's a lot that can go haywire these last few weeks. I'm very curious to see in what remains of this regular season, if we have a scenario like that where things go haywire in both those conferences, and a team like a Boise, a team like a Tulane ends up getting a first-round bye. I don't think it's likely. I would not want to put my money on that.
You would need a very specific outcome in one of those conferences, in the Big 12 or the ACC. But
You would. But there's potential for SMU to lose. There's still potential, I think, for Miami to lose. We know there's potential for Clemson to lose.
Miami has what? They're on the road at Syracuse, I want to say.
On the road at Syracuse, yeah.
Who had a nice win, by the way, themselves today against
win.
Cal. Yeah. Fran gets to take a shower. Is that, do you see that?
He does get to take a shower now.
Yeah, he's a washed winner. Yeah.
And Clemson, Clemson could end up losing a game to South Carolina, not an ACC game, but there's that element. The Big
I guess
12,
so. If Clemson somehow ends up in the ACC championship game with 3 losses, That's what we'd have to be talking about, losing to South Carolina, which obviously doesn't count against a conference record. Okay.
Yeah, and then, the Big 12 is in kind of a state of disarray as well. So maybe not quite to the same extent, given the fact that BYU right now is undefeated, that Colorado is playing really well in conference. I think that pathway looks a little bit more defined at this point. But to the folks out there who've been messaging me about this, I hear you. I see what you're saying. I'm still not putting my money on it.
I see you. Yeah.
But this whole notion of cannibalization in those two specific conferences is really interesting, I think, to chart. Definitely another thing that I've got the pin in.
Okay.
As we move forward these next few weeks.
Fair enough. Okay.
Any other conclusions that you drew from watching college football in Week 12?
Other than the Emmett stuff? I have to look at the scores again to remind myself. Ty, I'm old. I'm tired. Wazoo lost, right? Did Wazoo? I think as we were sort of starting the show, I was seeing in the comments, Wazoo lost to New Mexico.
Yeah.
Wow. Top 20 team, Ty.
And Oregon State got shut out by Air Force.
Dude.
Not a great week for the Pac-12. What remains of the Pac-12? The Pac-12.
So I saw somebody, again, this is unverified, but I thought it was so funny that I think whoever was calling the Oregon State Air Force game said something to the effect of, it's really difficult to see if Oregon State prepared for this game. It's really difficult to tell. And we had some SEC games against Mercer and New Mexico State, so there wasn't a ton to draw from any of those. I haven't seen that there were any major injuries in any of those, but perhaps something will come out. Hopefully not. I'm trying to think. Anything else for you, Ty?
Well, no, you mentioned the Air Force, or I mentioned the Air Force game.
Yeah.
And one of our quips going into this week with Air Force and Oregon State was you had the comment about it being a bunch of chemistry teachers in the 3 technique. Because
chemistry tutors, yeah.
Chemistry tutors, thank you. Neither one of these teams had a pass rush. No. Air Force had 5 sacks in this game, which does not bode well for Oregon State's line.
Right.
5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss on a defense that has not shown the propensity to do that at all this season. So the conclusion that I draw from that is that Oregon State's offensive line either took the week off or just outright stinks.
Do you have anything on the MAC? I know Bowling Green won and got bowl eligible. Buffalo won in overtime, 51-48 MACtion on Tuesday. It looks like Miami and Bowling Green are the class of the conference right now, but Ohio, I think, is also 5-1. So there's some fun action at the top of the MAC as they're still playing the championship game at Ford Field.
I believe
hope
so. Yeah. UTSA with a big win over North Texas. Notably, I think North Texas fired their defensive coordinator.
And UTSA, by the way, should probably have won 5 straight games. They lost to Rice and Tulsa, I want to say. Tulsa in a shootout. So nice comeback for the Roadrunners after an extremely slow start with the losses to Texas and Texas State. Yeah.
On the Tuesday episode that we do, not only are we going to talk about BYU, but I want to talk about some of these G5 conferences and where things stand.
Okay.
Because I've been charting them accordingly. This show's run a little bit long here, so I don't want to add more to this, but I will absolutely come back to that on Tuesday if you guys want to make sure you hit follow or subscribe. Let's read some of your comments out there.
Okay.
Ballerhood.
Roll. Play.
If I'm not me, who the hell am I?
We ask a question on social media across all of our social media platforms every Saturday night. It goes, I am a fan of blank, and right now I am feeling blank.
Ooh.
What did we get, Dan?
I'm a Florida fan, and I'm feeling mildly optimistic.
Hey, there you go.
I'm a Kansas fan, and I'm feeling tired. Yeah. Do we have a score right now, a live score for
17-13 at time of recording. It's 1:09 a.m. Eastern time. Kansas.
Kansas is beating BYU.
But BYU is driving.
BYU is driving at the moment. I'm a Sun Devil, and I'm feeling blessed. I'm a Clemson fan, and I'm feeling so mediocre. I'm a Pitt fan, and I'm feeling Pitt. I'm an Alabama fan, and I feel like we're lurking. Yeah, I don't think that's wrong. I'm a UNT fan, North Texas, and I'm feeling not so great.
Tough one. I'm
a big-ass fan, and I'm feeling windy, which I appreciate. Think on it. It's a very clever remark. I'm a Nevada fan, and I'm feeling drunk. I'm an Iowa State fan, and I'm feeling heartburn. I'm an Oregon fan, and I'm feeling like we definitely need a bye week. I agree with that. I'm a Nebraska fan, and I'm feeling, and then I'm seeing an emoji of a face melting into the ground and a face upside down. I'm a Kansas State fan, and I'm feeling disgusted. I'm a Gamecock fan, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm a Wake Forest fan, and I feel like Cooper Manning, and I guess that is because Omarion Hampton is still running against the Deacs. And let's see, Iowa State fan, breath of fresh air. USF fan, feeling relieved. I think they're at 500 now. Michigan State fan, and I feel nothing anymore after a comfortable loss to Illinois. Yeah. I'm a Nebraska fan. This is my favorite, and I feel the same.
Yeah, I feel the same. There you go.
Yeah, that's the worst feeling.
There you go.
Nothing changed.
Thank you to one and all for sending in those comments. We will, again, unpack some of these games that we did not have a chance to. I mentioned the Illinois game. I want to talk a little bit more about that on Tuesday.
Yeah.
As well. We also do a little thing on this show called Dude Alerts, Dan.
Please.
We ask you, a little bit after we ask you the first question, who should get our Dude Alerts for Week 12? These are individual performances that require the necessary dudeness, Dan.
Omarion Hampton, Jordan Tyson, Stanford's Emmets, Woody Marks, Lenora Sellers, Carson Beck, and the almost unanimous submission by Twitter commenters, Bryson Washington Baylor. And you know what? Mateo Uiagalelei had an excellent game and had the game-sealing interception for Oregon, was all over the place, rushing Braden Locke. I'm going to throw him in. Mateo Uiagalelei, a.k.a., and this is true, Young Concrete.
That's what he goes by. That's true. That
apparently,
is true.
yeah.
Is Bryson Washington a freshman?
I don't know. You can tell me, Ty.
I believe he's a freshman.
Ooh.
123 yards. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 60 yards receiving, also a touchdown through the air. He's a real deal, man.
He's class of 2023, it appears, so maybe a redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last but certainly not least, you called our Reverb line. It is our voicemail line at 855-VERBAL-3. Our guy Shay was on fumes after a long day at the office, but graciously put this together for us for the Verballerhood. Let's have a listen. These are your Week 12 Reverbs.
This is Premium Verballer Will from Birmingham, Alabama. After y'all's picks this week, I'll be moving into the Salvation Army. Not a sponsor. Absolutely could be.
Hi, Ty and Dan. It's Brittany from Dallas.
Hey, this is Ryan from Clemson. This is Peter, and I'm watching Pitt Clemson, and oh my God, Sean McDonough might be more pissed than Pat Narduzzi.
Oh,
Quick
man.
reminder that DJ Uiagalelei has more wins against Florida State than he has for Florida State. Go Tigers, baby. Roll Club, Nick.
This Notre Dame defense is just a ball-hawking unit. This team has done a fantastic job of recruiting studs all over the board, and no one's going to score on us the rest of the season.
Ty, you do not have to worry. The menu is set before friends are coming over. We're having Texas pulled pork tacos. Hook 'em horns.
So what I said earlier about Notre Dame not giving up any more points the rest of the year, points don't count after you're up 35-0. Everyone knows this.
I'm convinced that if the Arkansas Razorbacks could just hold on to the football, we might be able to beat anybody in the country.
I've just watched my Florida Gators sack Garrett Nussmeier more times in one game than he has been all season. We just eliminated them from the SEC championship, which I think might even lift the cleat eat curse.
Here's the thing about a lot of us Stanford alumni. We're used to taking more physical losses than wins. We're used to being bullied. But sometimes Nerd Nation punches back. In particular, we're going to take advantage of such self-inflicted wounds. Go big card.
You know what they say. 7th time the charm. Baylor finally beats West Virginia in Morgantown and is now bowl eligible. Sick 'em Bears.
They doubted us. They counted us out. But the Auburn Tigers have yet to lose a 7th game on the season. We control our Birmingham Bowl destiny. War damn Eagles.
Everybody's been criticizing Brian Kelly after losing to Florida today, but I don't know if we've considered the fact that he's just keeping Billy Napier in place so that we can beat him next year. Go Tigers, Gal.
This is James from Louisville, Kentucky. Jeff Brom wins the big game can't get it done as a 20-point favorite on the road in Stanford. But hey, at least I have a good bottle of bourbon.
Mateo Uliangole is the greatest duck of all time, and I am not being hyperbolic.
So we can agree that if the Big Ten was any better, Oregon would have like 2 losses by now, right?
Is Wisconsin the new Stanford for Oregon? I don't care. Get me the hell out of Madison. Go Ducks!
Number 1 team in the country against an unranked team. Oh, my Lord, my heart is racing. But that's the pain zone. That's where we want to live. Scary.
This is Matt calling from Omaha. I'm thinking our new state cocktail should be our Pride and Joy Kool-Aid mixed with bleach for all of us fans of the Sisyphus of college football. Is this a decade-long test to our collective fandom's ability to maintain any semblance of hope? I think the question for me has changed from when will this change to how can I keep doing this to myself, watching this every single week? Who am I kidding? See you all next week.
So
There it is.
It's Wisconsin and Iowa are the opportunities for Nebraska to get bowl eligible.
Yep.
The reference to Sean McDonough is the reference to a usually even-keeled play-by-play pro of the highest order watching the referees not call a Ken Ryu uppercut to Nate Yarnell. What do they do? How do you not throw a flag? And eventually, I think it was an unnecessary roughness flag throw.
Yeah.
But it was just a shot from a fist to a head from the chin. And he was like, there's no regulations in place here. Like, it was great. So that's
Annoyed Sean McDonough as a national treasure.
Yes. It was great.
And one of my fantasy things selections.
Of course.
Start of the year. Got to. Had to. Thank you to one and all for calling in. We will be sure to talk through the things that we did not have a chance to discuss on tonight's show. We'll do that on Tuesday on the spillover episode. We would encourage you all to check us out at verballers.com if you have yet to do so. We've got a poll that's going to go live tomorrow morning around 9 a.m. Eastern time where you can vote on the Verballer Top 12 poll. I do believe that I sorted out what was going on with the random Washington selection a week ago, Dan.
Okay.
I believe it was somebody who intended on voting for Washington State.
I hope so.
That is my theory.
And they cursed the Cougs.
And they may have cursed the Cougs in the process, yeah.
Can I tell you one more thing? We do our little Patriot League preview every week, the Patriot League Lightning Round. And the easiest pick was Fordham, Georgetown, right?
Right.
Fordham comes into the week 1-9. Fordham annihilated Georgetown 31-3 in the Pat League. You take nothing for granted, Ty.
Nothing for granted. There it is. All right. Verballers.com is where you can go if you want to vote in that poll. We would encourage you all to at least check it out. If nothing more, please hit follow, please hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. If you're interested in supporting what we do, if you're listening out there on Apple, leave us a review. If you're listening out there on Spotify, give us a star rating, leave a comment on this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Hit the like button, leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts on what transpired in Week 12. We will be back again on Tuesday to talk through whatever we missed on this episode. We will do the whole thing over again starting on Thursday where we preview Week 13. It is coming down to the wire. We got like 3 more big weeks here of this regular season, Dan. And then we get into the playoff and bowl season and all that. We'll be here with you every step of the way. That's why we want you to hit follow or subscribe. Boop. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thank you for hanging with us. As always, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay solid.
Peace.